Just last hour, Alberta announced 427 new cases of COVID-19, setting a new daily record for the second straight day. Despite those numbers, the Alberta and federal governments have announced a pilot program for international travelers entering at either the border or the Calgary International Airport. Instead of a mandatory 14-day isolation, travelers can be tested, and if it's negative, they can leave quarantine as long as they commit to a second test a few days later. Is the City of Calgary on board with this plan? Well, joining us now is Naheed Nenshi, the city's mayor. Mayor Nenshi, welcome back to Power and Politics.
Well, thank you very much. It's always great to be here.
I'd like to start with this new rapid testing pilot program because it's going to start at the airport in your city just as the province sees a surge in cases. Are you comfortable with any initiative that could shorten quarantine times?
Well, yes, there's always a balance to be drawn here. But one of the challenges with visitors coming here is that it's a 14-day quarantine, no question. And what they're trying to do now is include some rapid testing that could shorten the amount of the quarantine. So it's scientifically based, it makes sense, and hopefully it will help our visitor economy a little bit. You know, over on this part of the country, we rely on tourism a lot. And that out-of-country tourism has, in fact, completely stopped. So in time for ski season, if we can figure out a way to make it easier for both vacationers and business travelers to be able to come to Canada while keeping us safe, that's something that's well worth investigating.
How much risk is associated with this in your view?
Well, like everybody, I have become a professional epidemiologist and scientist over the last 8 months as we're trying to analyze all of this stuff. But, you know, ultimately, I had the opportunity to speak with the Federal Minister of Health about this. She is confident that Health Canada has faith in these tests, and I'm someone who believes in science and evidence, so I'm certainly willing to give it a try. But we have to remember that we are not out of the woods on this in any way. We have hotspots across the country, including here in Alberta, where we now have more cases than we did at the height of the lockdown in April. This is very troubling. And I want to remind people, as I have for the last many months, that unlike a flood or a fire where you can't control the outcome, the control of the pandemic is in our own hands. It's in our own clean hands. And so those simple things that we've been reminding people about are still so important. Wash your hands. Cover your cough, practice good hygiene. That's number one. Number two, keep that physical distance. 2 meters, 6 feet, or if you're in Calgary, 36 mini donuts apart is really important. And number three, wear your mask. And look, you can get cool masks with the Calgary skyline on them, but it's important to make sure that we're taking these actions to keep ourselves and others safe.
Jason Kenney has had a similar message to the Premier, who's now unfortunately in isolation because of close contact with someone who has tested positive, though he has tested negative. That says it's really up to Albertans to exercise personal responsibility. Is that what needs to happen here, or does the province need to do more in terms of putting further restrictions in place? Because sometimes people need to be told what to do rather than being asked what to do.
You know, I share with the Premier the sense that human beings are going to make the difference here more than government policy is, and that we need to all do the right thing. All of that said, we really have very few restrictions left in Alberta, and I would remind the Premier that he does have a plan with phases on it, and when we hit certain triggers, we ought to be going backwards. He seems to have been backtracking from that a little bit, but I think it's important to hold on to the thoughtful plan that was developed by scientists and doctors.
What about crowd sizes? I mean, in some of the recent cases, we've seen 49 cases of COVID-19 linked to a wedding with, I think it was 63 attendees held earlier this month. And that's prompted some doctors to say, look, we just need to change crowd sizes. I think it's 50 indoors, 100 outdoors. Is that too big given the level of the case numbers?
I tend to agree that this is the time for us to look at those gathering spaces, but I want to remind people how exponential growth works. And even if you're in a small crowd, but you find yourselves in other crowds, that's a problem. So I just heard of a horrible story today of a number of young women, high school students who have been infected, and they were infected coming from a Thanksgiving gathering of one of the families where someone who tested positive needed the turkey. So, you know, these are real challenges. And so we need to make sure that every single one of us is being incredibly responsible here, because even if you keep crowd sizes to 5 people, one of those people is infected and one of those people has a kid in high school, we're not going to be able to control this. So people need to be incredibly responsible. Stay home if you're sick. Limit your gatherings as much as possible. Go back to the Zoom dinners. this stuff really matters.
If the province doesn't restrict crowd sizes, would you look at doing it at the municipal level? Is this something that is within your authority to do if need be?
Well, it's an interesting question because normally the answer is no. Alberta is different than other jurisdictions because we don't have public health as a municipal responsibility. It's a provincial responsibility. But we do have the ability to declare a state of local emergency and make certain precautions then. But ultimately, it's so much better if we can do this with the province.
So when you look at the response from the various levels of government, we heard from Deputy Prime Minister Chrystia Freeland yesterday that there's going to be various pieces of legislation maybe coming next week that deal with things like wage subsidy extension, rental support and fixed cost support for people. When you look at the level of response that's there, and now that we're not going to have an election, is there more you would like to see from the federal government?
I think it's fair to say that governments at every level have really kept the wolves at the door for a lot of people who are really very desperate. For many people, it's not too much to say that CERB and now CRB are really life-saving things for their families. For businesses, particularly for smaller businesses and storefront retail businesses, the issue of rent relief is so important because what we want to do is we want to help these businesses survive through the interim. Studies have shown us that if a business closes in the midst of a natural disaster, some 40 or 50% of them don't reopen. Now, in the 2013 floods in Calgary, fewer than 5% didn't reopen, but the floods were only a few days before the water started to recede. This is a long haul, and ultimately, we want to help businesses succeed through this so they can thrive on the other end instead of them going out of business and new businesses having to start up and replace them going forward.
It's the 10th anniversary since you've been elected mayor. It's been about 10 years. And I guess when you started in this job, it was sort of at the height of the global financial crisis, which almost seems like the good old days compared to where we are right now. When you look at where the city is with the pandemic, with the oil transition and the oil slump that's been happening, for years, Calgary was this shining city of opportunity. Where is Calgary right now?
I've been looking at a lot of photos from 10 years ago, thanks Facebook memories, and man, oh man, there was a lot more hair and it was a lot blacker then. But I just want to remind everyone of an important statistical rule. Correlation does not equal causation. Because since I've been mayor, we've had the global financial crisis, we've had the second and fourth most costly natural disasters in Canadian history here in Calgary, and right now we're dealing with a global pandemic, a mental health and addictions crisis, an economic crisis, and this very real conversation that is much delayed that we need to have about making our communities across Canada anti-racist. So it's been a fun 10 years. I always joke that we have declared exactly 2 states of emergency in Calgary's 135-year history, and lucky me, I got to do both of them. But you know what? Calgary is still that shining city of opportunity. That's the most interesting part of all of this. Last year, The Economist once again ranked us as the very best country to live in the entire Western Hemisphere, followed quickly by Toronto and Vancouver, but we beat them. And this really matters, because we've created this extraordinary quality of life here in this country, but also in this city. We've created an incredible environment in which to invest, and an incredible environment for smart people, especially smart young people, to really be able to excel. So I often say, using my Rocky Mountain metaphor, that our valleys are other people's peaks. But at the same time, we've got some work to do, and we need partners across the country in the private sector, in the provincial and federal governments, to help us make sure that we capitalize on this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to remake the economy here. Calgary is still the economic engine of the country. Alberta still pays much more into federal coffers than we get out, even in the depths of economic despair. But we have a chance right here, right now, to be able to invest in this region, to invest in the economy, to invest in the people, so that this part of the country continues to be the economic engine for the rest of us and a beacon of light for the world.
And where do you think, if that is able to happen, what does Calgary look like 10 years from now?
I think Calgary looks a lot like it does now, but more and better. I'll give you an example. We can't turn our back on the Canadian energy sector. It's not only a critical part of our economy, it's also the most powerful poverty-fighting tool we have to provide people at home and abroad with clean, safe, reliable energy. But that energy sector is transitioning. We all know that. There's no reason why Calgary shouldn't be the center of clean, green, and renewable energy as well as conventional energy. So yes, we need market access, we need pipelines, but we can also invest deeper and further and more thoughtfully. And when we think about all the other areas where Canada and Calgary are strong, if it's financial services or transportation and logistics or tourism or agri-food, 7 billion people in the world got to eat, there are real opportunities for us to be world leaders in all of that. So 10 years from now, I'll probably have less hair, but we will see a Calgary that is even more of what it is now, that maintains that incredibly high quality of life, but that does so in a way that is even more diverse, even more vibrant, and really solving more of the problems. Our economic vision in Calgary is really straightforward. It is to be the location of choice for the world's best entrepreneurs. Now, everybody says that, but the last part is important, who want to solve the world's biggest problems. And whether those are problems in energy or in feeding the world or in determining ways that technology can be more equitable, those are the kinds of people and those are the kinds of challenges that we want to solve right here.
Well, Mayor Nenshi,
that was my economic development commercial.
Well, Mayor Nenshi, 10 years in, your hair is still looking better than mine. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much. And everyone, please stay safe. As I've been saying since the beginning, it's about us. Clean hands, clear heads, open hearts.
Hi, I'm Vashi Capellos, host of Power in Politics. See more of our show by subscribing to the CBC News channel or click the link for another video.